Hey, it's Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com. It is Wednesday. It's October 7th. This will be our chart lesson for today. And um, in the end, it was just a kind of a range day. We spent most of the day in I'd call the lows around 68 to about 90 or so. We actually were a little bit lower than that in the overnight, but during the day, we stayed within this price range of basically 68 to about 90. So it's a pretty big range. It's a 20-point range, but so it gives you a nice trend in each direction. And so the key is to find these trends on the way up and the way down and on the way down. This one was a little confusing because we got a break. Really, we got a confirmation here and then a break, uh, but it just took off again. But there's a shorter term trend channel in there you can follow, and notice how you got the overshoot here of the bigger one and then the overshoot of the smaller one. And a lot of times that will lead to a reversal. Um, in this case, it didn't. We bounced again and actually went higher. This is actually a long here. We actually bounced and continued higher again right off that trend line all over again. So, um, you got to take what you get here. But if you follow the shorter term ones, everything worked out great. Notice you're coming up, you get a break here of this trend line and a new high, and then it's moving down. You get a break right here. Notice you got the overshoot first, you get a break, and then you get two fairly, for the most part, measured legs down. There's leg one, and then there's leg two, and it's basically a perfect two measured legs down, and then it reverses. And so, and a lot of times you'll get two legs like that. In most cases you do. Lately, when you find these highs, we're only getting one leg up and we're not really getting very high. We're just pushing higher just enough to trap people and then it reverses. So keep that in mind. But um, this is a spiking channel here. Then this was a huge sell-off here. And then it was a nice rally again. And believe it or not, the market closed up considerably because it closed down here yesterday at 68, and notice where it bounced. It pulled back and tested that. There was actually a gap there in the overnight chart. Notice it closed here and went down there, and it came down. Um, it actually pulled back right here and filled the gap, but there was a little gap there, and it came back and tested that, and then we worked higher from there. And that's pretty typical. So, but let's back out and talk about the trades. I've been a little late doing these the last couple of nights. I apologize they're later, but just had a lot going on. So, but the first trade I saw after the 7 o'clock hour was right here. There was a news item in here somewhere this morning too. Um, didn't really change anything. I want to say it was right around 9. Well, maybe it did because that was when we got the break and soon after reverse, but somewhere in there around 9 o'clock. I don't even remember what the news item was, but we did reverse after that. So, um, but let's talk about this first trade. Notice what we got. We got a new low here. We push up. Um, you could actually count this as a second entry right here because this is a triple top. So this is like a new high. You pull back, you go first entry. You pull back, you go second entry. Um, I didn't like this signal bar. Looking back at it, it probably should be green. But we weren't back to the trend line. It's not a great signal bar. There's a little stack up right there. I'm not even going to mark it green because I didn't like it this morning when I looked at it, and so I don't think we ought to mark it. But when you get the failed second entry short, that's where you want to go long. So notice the new low. You pull back first entry, pull back second entry, and look at that little reversal bar. Just go long right there. That was a pretty nice entry. It took a minute to get going. But when we turned down here again, I was kind of looking at this as a trading range right in here. I ended up moving it down a little bit more where you got the most touches across there. This was like a little break higher. It's tempting to go short here, but you got this big move up and you've got a trend line here possibly, so you got to be real careful. And this really confirmed the trend line. There's actually a long there. The reason I didn't mark this one, looking back at it, it definitely ought to be green. Um, but at the time, this is what I was thinking. Let me make this green and I'll tell you what I was thinking and the reason I skipped this one. But that is a key entry point, and that's a nice bullish bar. But let me tell you what I was thinking. Um, I was seeing this range across here, and this was getting long right into that resistance right across there. So I was a little hesitant of it. It does break above and pull back and give you a chance to get in a little further back here. But I just think you're better off to wait. And you do get a better entry over here. But looking back at it, that's such a bullish bar. And it is off a key entry point. It does confirm this trend line. There's a lot of reasons to like that trade. It's a little aggressive because we're in this range. And look at all those doji stacked up. But that's another thing. We got into a little tighter congestion area. And this is like a little failed break lower out of that and a reversal. So looking back at it, I probably should have taken it, but I just, when I was watching it in real time, I just didn't like it. But I do like this one when it pulls back. This is like the real breakout pullback, and it does make a little bit higher high than these three, and it pulls back. And even though that's kind of a doji, notice how it closes in the upper part of the bar, so it's more bullish than neutral. It's kind of a bullish neutral type bar. So I liked it. You got a rough room to get out before you get back to the highs, and it's right off that trend line. Um, so I liked it. And then you get up here and you get a second entry long right here. This is not a great signal bar right here, but it's more neutral. But it's a second entry long. It's right off the key entry point, right off the EMA. At the very least, I would have let it break higher and maybe dropped a limit order in there. Um, so you get a little bit further back, a little bit better entry. But this thing is looking really strong. And to be honest, I would also be looking for a measured move, possibly, if we continue to go higher. Um, and that's a good, when we end up reversing here and don't get anywhere near that, that's a good signal that you're probably going to go further in the other direction. Um, so I was still thinking we may push on higher at this point. Generally, you want to see a little more bullishness to that signal bar. But this is a very strong market. This is a spiking channel, and we're bouncing right off that key entry point. So that's why I liked it. Um, you could have actually looked at this like another little short-term spiking channel here almost. Notice what you get right up through here. You really kind of get another little spiking channel right here, but again, you get that break in the same place. You see, if you take that trend line and move it up, look how it fits. It fits nicely across there. But you get your overshoot here and your break, regardless of whether you saw it the bigger way or the shorter term way. So I will go ahead and just make this a little lighter so it's not so confusing. But I was playing the bigger channel, but if you saw this one, still you get the same result. So you didn't have to see it exactly the same. As long as you saw one or the other, you're good to go. And guess what? You get your break here. Either way, you move to a new high. Look at that big bearish bar. You can't go short there. I don't even like going short right here because it's right into the EMA. But when you get that failed second entry long there and that big bearish bar, you better be going short right there because that's a sure enough, that break and that move to a new high, you're probably coming at least back to here to test this kind of resistance that turned into support and see what happens there. It looks like it's going to bounce, but it ends up going through and coming back and testing it just like you'd expect, and then it goes lower. This actually was supposed to be circled in green, and I forgot to circle it. And I put that arrow there so I wouldn't forget to talk about it or to mark it, and I still forgot to mark it. So I'm going to go ahead and put the circle there before I forget. But this was notice the new high, pullback first entry, pullback second entry, and it looks like a little bullish bar. So they're going to trap a lot of people there. Look how it turns down. Just go short. Just put your stop there And if it goes by too quick, put a limit order to see if it comes back, and it would have filled it. And then it comes back and it turns down again right off that trend line. And this is another form of a kind of this. Well, it's a breakout pullback short first, but it's also another form of a failed second entry long because this is like one leg down and this two legs. And let's just measure it to make it a little more clear. This is one move, even though there's two legs in there, and then there's a two-leg correction. Then this is another move. So this is like a second entry long on a slightly larger chart, and it may be a little more advanced for some of you, but I'm going to talk about it and put it on here anyway. I like that trade, and it's a breakout pullback from this area right across here, and it takes off again. It's more of a neutral bar. You might have had a little better looking bar, and if it was any more bullish looking than that, this still closed, and there's maybe 3 ticks on the top and 2 on the bottom, so it's still closed. If you had anything more bullish than that, I'd make that a green one and maybe not take it at all because it's getting a little close even on my chart. But look at that move down, and it's right off that key entry point. Now this one I made green. Notice what happened here. Again, we talked about that. This was resistance across here. Then it acted as support, and it looked like it was going to act as support, and it broke through, and it pulls back and test it. And there's 2 legs in there. It moves up, it pulls back, and it moves up. And so on a smaller chart, it didn't get back to the trend line though. So sometimes that can be suspect, but it is right there on the midline. And what I want, another thing that I wanted to, the reason I put the arrow there is this thing opened, closed on its high and opened on its high and traded all the way up. And at the last second, it traded down and closed and ticked and filled that little gap. And so it gapped right over that midline. And that told me that this line was valid. But when it shot over, that also told me that this is probably a midline and we're probably going lower. So that's another thing I want to talk about. But it's a 2-legged move, and if you went to a smaller chart, you would see a clear second entry short there. Again, if that's confusing to you, don't worry about it. It's just a first entry on this chart. So if you can't see that, don't let that confuse you. Just take it that it's a first entry on this chart. But if you started going to maybe a 5,000 or 4,500 volume, you may somewhere you'd see the second entry. It's there. And then guess what? You find the equal distance, you put the other line on here, and you get the overshoot. What is an overshoot? Sometimes will lead to a reversal without having had a break, but generally it's going to at least lead to a break outside, a close outside of your trend line, and that's exactly what happens. It pulls back, it tries to go higher. It doesn't tick higher here, but it still pulls higher, and then it goes down, and it tries to go higher again, and again, on a slightly smaller chart, you'd see a failed second entry long there. But either way, it made a much higher low and then turned down. So I like that for going short there. Somebody asked me about something similar to this today. I think it was maybe down here somewhere, or maybe right here. I can't remember. Somewhere down here, they took a second entry short, counting off this high. And you know, that's generally when I'm going to look for a second entry is off a major high, like when it's a reversal. There are times when you would look at this and say, hey, it's a second entry here, and that's when you would do it on this right here. But I think it was right in here because we'd had a big rally all the way up, and then they were looking to get short up here after that big move. But what I want to tell that person before I forget is that when you've rallied this hard, you better wait on some kind of trap or something before you consider going short again, because that's telling you something. It's telling you something's wrong. You shouldn't have this bigger rally and a big downtrend like this unless it's starting to reverse or something. And you actually had your break here, and like I said, and you had 2 perfect measured legs down to a new low here to the tick. And so you better be careful about getting short again. So I hope that's clear. But anyway, back to this trade right here. This turned out to be a really nice trade. It just keeps working lower. You can't get short in here. You got to wait for it to come back. And the only reason I like this short, um, what I would have done was waited on it to break and see if you could get back just a couple of ticks back. It's a second entry short. This was actually your signal bar. It broke higher and turned and went out this side. When it broke down below that, I would have come back in here a tick or so just to give me enough room to get out before that bottom right there, that double bottom. And you could have gotten filled multiple times before it went lower. And so this is really your signal bar when it broke higher and turned down. But this is the bar we're using for all intents and purposes. This is your signal bar and your entry bar in the end. But hopefully that made sense. And then we shot to a new low. And now you got to be really careful about getting short anymore because you had a close out up here. And it's not a real strong one, but it's still a close. And it must have been good enough because we still kept trying to go lower here and just kept bouncing. There's some strong support across there. I don't have my line there. Let me move it down. This was later in the day. And you can see that support across there. And you can see the resistance. It's just a little trading range across here, really. But notice this second entry short here. Notice that there's a double bottom, so you can count this as a new low. But look how it goes right through the EMA. And then you get a first entry, pull back, then you get a second entry. I didn't like this trade a whole lot because it's your first real close outside that, and you didn't have a new high. You've already had a reason for this to reverse, but it is a second entry, and that, even though that's a slightly neutral, it's got more of a bearish tint, so it's a neutral to bearish bar, and then you got this big bearish bar right here. So you might have considered trying to get a break below that one and dropping a limit order back in there where this one would have gone. You might have even considered just using a stop if you want to be aggressive, because this was a very strong move down. And even after that break and a new low, there's probably a chance we're going to attempt to test that low again. So there's some reasons to be a little more aggressive here if you're good at reading the chart. But notice what happens. You bounce, you get a move to a new low, and then you get a trend working lower. It's tempting to go long in here, but I don't see any setup that I would want to take really until you get here and you get that trap, and then that's way too far away from the EMA, way too high. I don't think you want to go long there. You can't go short in here. You get a failed second entry long here, so you might have thought about going short right there. You probably got room to get out before this low. So looking at that one again, I'm probably willing to give that. Plus, it is the first break of this trend channel working down, so I'm willing to give that one a green one. Because something's going on here. We're not really taking off. We should have really bounced and taken off that EMA there. So we probably trapped some longs here. People trying to pick these, pick a bottom here, but you've already got. Make sure I point this out. There's your first leg up, and so you're looking for a measured leg to here, and you see we overshot that, and this is your measured area right in here, and look how it just starts stacking up sideways. That's another reason I really don't like it. This is just a little trading range. You might have considered this a failed break out of it. It's a failed second entry long, so you don't have to have a perfect signal bar or anything. So there's some aggressive reasons to take it. I felt like you're better off to skip it unless you're wanting to be super aggressive. It turned out to be a super trade, but you don't know that. And you don't want to be gambling and taking a chance. You want to pretty much bet on sure things. Now, we had this trend line working up through here. So when this came back, let me show you this. You got to break above this bar first, but that's a first entry. And I don't think you want to take a first entry there. This bar is too big. You don't want to be getting along that close to the EMA and that far, and your stop having to be way down here. But when it turns back down and gives you that reversal bar, I like that one. Um, and you actually could take this one if you waited on it to break above this bar and dropped your limit order back here. And it would have come back on this bar, but since it didn't come back here, I probably would have canceled that. But if you, some people might have waited on it to come on back and get you within that 2 points. And but by the time it gets down here, it's really scary. And I got shaken out anyway. Really, this one is real borderline green. And there are some special uh, situations you don't want to go long above that bar. You want it to break above it and then put your limit order back here a little further. And notice how you got a double bottom there, and it did go lower and then go out the top side, so it's probably trapped some people. But the better trade is to wait here. If you got in this one and you weren't out yet, this is one I like adding on to, because we made a double bottom and then a higher low here, and you got a nice reversal bar, and then you're working back. There's actually a second entry long here, but you're not back to the trend line on. Well, I guess you are back to the trend line on this shorter term one, but you weren't back to this one yet. It didn't come back to this bar. Um, so if you went long right there, you probably would have gotten stopped out. But um, I don't think you want to go long there because you end up with a doge. You end up with, this is more bullish. It's got some stem on the top, but when this one ended up kind of the same way, um, if you'd entered with a limit order, I probably would have got out if I could. But when it went lower and then turned back up here, that's what I liked, letting it break above there and then come back, because now you got your bounce off this, and it did close inside that trend line. So that gives you some more, more information. That trend line's probably valid up through there. Otherwise, it wouldn't have closed up there behind both of them off of it. So I like that one. Based on following, doing it the way I said, letting it break above, coming back with a limit order, and actually waiting on this bar right here. This is really your signal bar, this big one with this mostly red. So you had to wait on this one and let it break and come back. But it's possible you might have gotten tricked in there because it does bounce off that trend line. It is a fairly bullish bar. If you did, not much else you can say about it other than, the only thing that might have kept you out of that is that these are not bullish bars that are taking off, and this is still in this kind of trading range looking deal. It's kind of back in it. Probably should put this lower part on there. You can see that we're kind of back into that. Come on here. Kind of back into that area right across there. But that might have actually led you to think about getting in there. There's not a lot of room to get out from here either, so that's another reason you need to use a limit order. So there's some different thinking there. If you got tripped up there, not much you really could do there. You might have even been tempted to go short, but hopefully you saw this support across here, and when it came back to it, that's a big bearish bar. If you went short there, it would have worked. You would have gotten out, and that's probably maybe why this thing shot on down just long enough to get those traders out before it reversed. But I was still thinking long here because we got this working up, and it looked like we were getting a break, but you figured we'd get a retest. So I was still in the long mode and wasn't thinking short here, plus of this range here. You had to be careful with this range here. And the better place to get long was right here. There's a breakout pullback long. That's not a very good setup right there. Even though you might have considered taking that, being aggressive. Look how close you are. But when it turned down again and then immediately turned and went up, just get long in there. There's no way it's coming back for you. Look how it just kept going. But they had people trapped short right there. So I like that one just because of that little turn down in that trap, and that's a higher low than that bar made. Once you get up here above this, you can't take any of that. You might have considered going short here, but I wouldn't do that. It's right into the EMA. You got this bearish bar. It's probably going to pull back. And when it pulls back and tests the high of that channel and gives you a failed second entry long and that big bearish bar, I like that one for a short. You figure you're coming back down here. And normally, when you're working up like this, you wouldn't want to go short in here. But we're still swinging. Look how we're still going back and forth to each side of the EMA. We started to kind of rally here, but again, you're working back lower. You know it's a range day. When it's a range day, if you get the right kind of setup, you can trade it both ways. So that's why I like that one, simply because it's the trap. You don't want to go long there when this shot through the EMA and is heading back down, especially with an overshoot, because that could have reversed this thing. You got a break here, then an overshoot, so you would have thought this thing might go the other way. But look at this trend channel coming down. You get a break, move to a new low, and this bounces right off the trend line. So I like that one. It's a little small bar. You're way away from the EMA. So I liked it for just to pull back to the EMA. And then it just kind of got hung up across there. There's no other entries. You don't want to go short or long in there. And that gets you into the 2 o'clock hour. So it was an interesting day. Pretty good trading day. It always helps to draw these shorter term ones, the lighter ones, because as you can see, it helps you even within the larger one. And this one was a little bit confusing because you had a break here and you figure you get a new low, it might reverse. But if you, once you got to the highs up here, you figure that it's probably going to turn down, but it doesn't. It just shoots right on through. And that's why you don't want to be trying to pick tops up in here, because sometimes it goes further than you think it will. Generally, when you get an overshoot here, you're going to get kind of a measured one here, but we got even higher than that. I wasn't here during this lunch hour, so I don't know if maybe we might have had some news in here or something. Did we have some news today? I can't remember. Yeah, I think customer credit came out, but it didn't come out until 2 o'clock, so I don't think this had anything to do with it. We just had a nice rally here for whatever reason. There's probably something out there you could go look up, and there'll be some news they made up to match it. But again, we don't really care about that. But anyway, you can see it's just a range day. We did close up considerably, though, from where we closed here down here yesterday at 68. And then we closed today, looks like 87, almost 88. So almost a 20-point close in the end. So good trading day, two pretty good trends in each direction. This is where it gets, once you've gotten your break and you start making new lows. Somebody else asked me about this. You're better off just to kind of sit and watch. And notice how you really, from 10:30, it was almost an hour before you had a clear setup again. There's some higher, more aggressive trades in here. But really from 10:30 to 11:30, there's not much there. And that's when it pays to be patient. And I say this a lot. I hadn't said it lately probably, but sometimes the best trade is no trade. And I'll see these iffy setups like right in here. And somebody will take the trade and they'll see a trap and it'll turn out to trap both ways, and they just don't see the big picture. And, they'll ask me about it when they had all these good trades that were sure things down through here, and then they want to take one right in here. The market's it's kind of in indecision here. This is neutral. I mean, we're not really trending anymore. We're just going sideways. That's when you just sit still, don't take any trades, and wait. And then you get this huge move down, and when you get that far away from the EMA, you want to think about catching the ride back to it, especially when it's looking like kind of a reversal pattern here. And then when you start getting this sure trend going up, then you want to try to get long. But when you get in the kind of no man's land, the best trade is no trade. And so I hope that's clear. Just if you're not sure, don't take a trade. um, because the worst thing you can do is gamble. And when you're, we're not gamblers, because if you gamble at this, you will lose. Trust me, you will lose your money. Um, so we want to take the high probability, almost sure thing kind of trades. And so keep that in mind. And, if you're not sure, or if you are not real confident, the worst, what'll happen is you won't be sure about anything, and you'll watch this whole trend move down, and then it'll finally get like right in here, and you say, oh, now we're probably going to test the lows again, and then you try to get short, and it doesn't go anywhere. And that's what tends to happen to people. They don't want to get short until they've got sure confirmation, but you want to sell high and buy low, and so you got to be able to kind of learn to judge where the key entry points are and where the reversals are going to happen in the pullbacks. So maybe that helps some people. I hope that's clear. If it's not, back this up and listen to it a few times until it does make sense, because that's a key part of this thing. So, but anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. This is Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.